I'm not sure if I would call it controversial, but I have seen things that kind of are the opposite of what I've done and what I've seen actually works really well. Hello, welcome to a new week, a new storytelling tip. I am considered for like half a second if I should talk about what's going on, my thoughts and feelings on the pandemic and corona and the quarantine. And I'm not. I don't think it's necessary for yet another person to talk about my feelings about it. There's just a lot of it, and it's not gonna help anyone to just give you my opinion on it. So I do want to give you value today, and that's the story tip for today. I want to talk about pre-interviews and something that I'm not sure if I would call it controversial, but I have seen things that kind of are the opposite of what I've done and what I've seen actually works really well. So I don't know if it's a controversial thing or it's just that we completely disagree. But basically, first, if you don't know what a pre-interview is, it's basically what it sounds like. It's when you have a conversation with your interviewee or potential interviewee before you actually film the interview. And the purpose is to get to know the story better so you can have an idea of what the story is. The opposing idea or advice that I don't agree with is the idea that you shouldn't go in depth or dive deep into a pre-interview. You just want to figure out like just the basics. You don't want to go too deep, just kind of like the superficial information, and you want to leave the emotional and the deeper conversation for the camera. The other reason for that is you don't want to manipulate the story. You don't want to influence it too much, even if it's subconscious. You want to touch it as little as possible, let it kind of be an organic fall in your lap type of story. In theory, that sounds good, right? But here's the problem with that. A good story, especially through the medium of video, does not just happen. It just doesn't happen like that. A good story has a solid structure, and a solid structure is what makes that story be engaging and effective. And that's what can connect you with the audience. And so this idea that you shouldn't prepare, basically, doesn't really work out that well. And I've done it both ways, several times. The other thing is, in all cases, you're going to be editing. Unless you show the raw interview, which might be like an hour or more long. You can't just play that and call it good. You're going to be editing. You're going to be cutting the story down. Excuse me. And essentially you are making decisions on the story and how you're telling it. And that's what story structure is. And so you basically are deciding, do you want to know what the story structure is going into it before you film? Or are you going to figure that out after? And in my experience, I've done a lot of interviews, guys. I've done a lot, and I've done a lot even without my process and without the story aspect of it. And I will tell you, it is way, way more effective to plan and to go into your interview prepared, knowing what your story is and knowing that story structure before you start filming. So here's the tip. A pre-interview allows you to create the story structure in advance. And that's going to be super helpful. It's going to be way easier in post-production, putting it together because you know. So I recently did a pre-interview with a guy whose story we're going to tell for Easter. And it was like an hour and a half long. No, it was over an hour and a half of pre-interview. And I'm really glad because through that I learned a lot. The first thing I learned is that we were initially going to just be interviewing him for his story, but I learned that one of the main points in his story is heavily influenced by his wife. So I think it would be smart to interview her in some shape or form, even if it's separate. But I would only have learned that if I had done that in-depth pre-interview. And the second thing I learned his whole story. It's very long. It's a long journey. But I can start on that story structure and figure out what I need to cut and what things to focus on, what we need to tell, and what things are just tangents. And that way, in the actual interview that we're filming, I can lead that conversation more and specifically dive deeper into the parts that are really important, that we didn't dive deep into the pre-interview. If I hadn't done that pre-interview, the actual filmed interview would basically have looked like that pre-interview. Super duper long, lots of unnecessary tangents, and not had the opportunity to dive deep into the aspects of the story that are really important. That's why I think pre-interviewing is so important, and it really just helps you prepare and just go into the interview feeling confident and knowing the story, but still not manipulating it or making it your own. I can talk more about that another time. But anyway, I hope that explains why I think pre-interviewing in depth is really important, and hopefully you can apply that and see how it works for you. If you have questions, please comment. If you like this, please like my video. Please share it. Tag a friend who would also enjoy this content. That will help me continue to give you guys tips and free content. So until next week, happy storytelling.